Please stop. Michael, you're really hurting me.
Put your feet down.
What if I told you that 1 in 10 people will have at least one personality disorder during the course of their lives? It's very likely that you know or are someone who has a personality disorder. And as we'll see, the young couple Michael and Ruth in Oneal Walters' book, The Empty Couple, seems to be experiencing tension due in part to personality disorders. Now, in part 1 of this collaboration mini-series, we discussed what psychology says about your rights in a relationship, as well as what builds and harms relationships. A few things to note. First, I am only using academic sources. Second, please do not try diagnosing yourself or others with this information. This is meant to give you a general frame of reference for what's healthy and unhealthy, okay and not okay, but officially diagnosing someone should be left to qualified professionals. Third, I am not saying that people with these disorders are inferior or damaged goods because they have problems. These problems will likely strain a relationship to some degree, but many of them can be managed effectively. This is about making informed decisions, not judging or labeling other people. The only time that I do highly recommend getting away from someone with one of these problems is if they pose a danger to you. And at the extreme end of the spectrum, for some of these disorders, they could. But unless they do pose a danger, I do not advocate abandoning someone just because they've got problems. Fourth, disorders used to be based on a categorical method of diagnosis. Either you are or you aren't diagnosable, but the most updated way of evaluating disorders is using a spectrum. And since personality disorders often just seem like extreme versions of typical personality traits and moods, the spectrum is especially important for this category of illness. The spectrum allows people to have different degrees of these symptoms without being technically diagnosable. And then once they are so extreme as to be diagnosable for one of these, then there are different degrees of symptoms even among those people. We are all unique individuals, and the spectrum reflects how even those with the same disorder have different extents and patterns of symptoms. You can likely already guess what defines paranoid personality disorder: a constant pattern of interpreting others as deceitful, selfish, and malicious, constant worries that others will mistreat or victimize them, and a tendency to misinterpret others' behavior in a way that confirms these suspicions. People with this disorder often notice details about others that most miss, and spend great deals of time figuring out other people's true intentions from these details. No amount of rational argument will shake them of these assumptions, and anyone who does argue will likely be considered part of a conspiracy. They know that their way of seeing the world is correct and superior. Expect those with this disorder to bear grudges and react with hostility to even perceived threats. After all, the best defense is a good offense. When under stress, these symptoms actually become worse. It goes without saying that this disorder puts a huge strain on relationships, especially since those suffering with it tend to avoid any type of intimacy to protect themselves. Turning left to the master bedroom, Michael stumbles in and yells, "Oh! Oh!" Like a wounded beast. A piece of shattered glass has pierced his left foot, causing it to bleed. Ruth yawns, and feeling for the desk lamp, she turns it on. She looks warily at his piercing eyes and his gorilla stance. "I'm sorry, what happened?" "You're trying to kill me!" he bellows. "You didn't clean up!" Michael broke a plate whenever he was angry at Ruth, and she did clean up the mess, but she missed a shard. Now, whenever Michael accuses Ruth of trying to kill him, it does maybe seem kind of like paranoia at first, but I really don't think that's what we're seeing here. It seems more like Michael has this habit to try to blame Ruth for pretty much everything that goes wrong, even if it's his fault.
I mean, he did break the plate.
I would say that this is more of a demonstration of Michael projecting his own flaws and mistakes onto Ruth and trying to take the responsibility off of himself. You've no doubt heard of narcissists. Most with narcissistic personality disorder think they are superior to everyone else and should get their way all the time, even if it means stepping on others along the way. this attitude can help them get ahead in cultures that value confidence and courage. However, they often run into trouble when their overconfidence leads them to make bad choices, irritate people important, and therefore miss good opportunities. Thoughts of self-importance, power, and success preoccupy them. These people create drama to get attention, win admiration, and maintain their, sizable ego. In relationships, narcissists are shallow, act entitled to whatever they want, invalidate others' feelings, needs, and desires, manipulate others to gain control, and look down their nose at other people. To them, depending on anyone else shows weakness. Narcissists are more likely to physically and sexually aggress on others, react impulsively, entertain homicidal thoughts, and attempt suicide than people without this disorder. There's a lesser-known category of narcissists also, whose inflated ego is actually really weak and delicate instead of unrelenting. This type will daydream about their importance and avoid others for fear that other people will burst their proverbial bubble by critiquing or rejecting them. "You can't do anything right!" he yells. "Only a stupid woman would wash all my clothes at once." Grabbing the snack, he strikes the plate with his fist. "Look what you made me do! Clean it up! All I wanted was clean clothes. You ruined my day." Almost hidden in the dark, he reaches over for her cell phone, exclaiming, "I'm the victim! I'm the one bleeding! If I'm a monster, you made me this way!" He grips her cell and raises his hand high, then brings it straight down like a roller coaster. Her cell phone falls and bounces off the floor in pieces. "You're a monster!" she screams. "Stop doing this to me!" She charges at him, breaking through his cobra stare. She pushes Michael with her right hand. "I need my cell for work!" When she tries to push him a second time, he grabs her wrist. "You're hurting me," she pleads. "Please stop! Michael, you're really hurting me!" He grabs her other wrist and holds both, pulling them closer to his chest. He snaps his lower back forward and fully extends his arms. Ruth falls backward, hitting her head on the bed. Michael does show some signs of narcissistic personality disorder here. Entitlement, a shallow and manipulating way of relating to Ruth, impulsive reactions, and physical abuse. He obviously looks down on Ruth as inferior to himself. Something I would also love to know more about is how he treated Ruth before he lost his job. When Michael loses his job, he starts to change. He becomes angry, violent. He disappears for hours at a time and returns home stinking of alcohol. If he was a lot better and there was a big switch, then it probably wasn't an ongoing, pervasive pattern in his personality. I would have to see a lot more about Michael. Another illness that you've likely heard of is antisocial personality disorder. Those with antisocial are not the same as psychopaths, but there is considerable overlap. Those with this disorder lack most, if not all, ability to form healthy relationships, tend to violate others' basic rights and fundamental social norms, have poor control over their impulses, and pursue their own wants regardless of the cost, like manipulating another person. They may feel little to nothing in response to another person's pain and the results of their actions. These people become bored quickly and therefore tend to swing from job to job and relationship to relationship. Since consequences don't bother them, thrill-seeking often appeals to them. Now, we have already seen from the first video in the miniseries, as well as earlier in this episode, that Michael does seem to derive pleasure from abusing Ruth, and does whatever will give him his way. He clearly lets his impulses reign, even trashing Ruth's belongings and beating her around, which are huge violations of another person's basic rights of safety and property. But also in the first video of this mini-series, we also read about his concern for Ruth whenever he sees her lying on the floor, which indicates that he does have at least some concern for her and for the consequences of his actions. Now, those with antisocial can be really good at faking charm and faking concern, but in the book, he was alone whenever he found Ruth lying on the floor. There's no reason for him to put on a show whenever there's no audience. Plus, he has been in the relationship with Ruth for at least 4 years, and he has worked as a mechanic for 10 years in the same place. He didn't leave that job of his own volition. Most with Antisocial would have already gotten bored and bailed on both the relationship and the job long before this point. So he has a few symptoms that look like antisocial personality disorder, but I find it dubious that he actually would be diagnosable for it. Again, I would need to see more of what is actually going on in his head, his thought processes, before I could go any farther in examining him. Now, probably the most complex and difficult to diagnose personality disorder is borderline. It often manifests with other types of problems like phobias, substance abuse, or anxiety. Turbulence defines this one. Wild, uncalmable emotions for little or no apparent reason. Extreme fear of rejection. Self-destructive habits like cutting or suicide attempts. Unstable view of one's own identity and feelings. And loss of touch with reality for normally only short periods of time, like forgetting who they are or losing all sense of time for a few moments. People with borderline hardly ever pose a danger to those around them, but their disorder does strain relationships a great deal. They cling very tightly to others, hypersensitive to anything that even looks like rejection. Since their own self-image has barely any grounding, they fluctuate between self-doubt and self-importance. This extreme swing normally depends heavily on other people. Without reason, those with borderline can suddenly switch from adoring to loathing somebody, and vice versa. Their perception and recollection of events are almost always negative. Neither Michael nor Ruth show the extreme emotional swings that characterize this personality disorder. Michael certainly does have a lot of outbursts in the book, but they're pretty much always negative. It's not a swing from negative to positive like you see in borderline. His identity seems pretty stable, albeit unhealthy, and it is clear that he really doesn't care how Ruth looks at him, as long as she is willing to do whatever he says and give him what he wants. Another disorder defined by an extreme fear of rejection is dependent personality disorder. Rejection, independence, making decisions by themselves, these terrify people with this condition. Those with dependent personality disorder harbor an anxious need to be cared for. These people have trouble functioning outside of a relationship, and some with an extreme case can become completely immobilized without someone around to help them make everyday decisions and offer approval. For this reason, they will submit to abuse and unreasonable demands, deny their own feelings and thoughts they think a close relation won't like, and cleave desperately to loved ones, whatever it takes to keep the relationship. Wait, when did you get engaged? Kevin Christian, Ruth's employer, says. Congrats! This morning, Ruth says. It's like a dream come true. We don't have a wedding date yet, but we both hated living together as common law partners, so he popped the question and I said yes. Michael has started a new body shop and we recently bought a house. Hun, I had a wonderful dream, or maybe two of them, Ruth says, stretching in bed and smiling at her memories. They were signs that things will get better. He must have read my note. Why didn't he wake me? Doesn't he find me beautiful? I'm beautiful, aren't I? Ruth struggles to pay the bills and keep up appearances, but is she strong enough to escape the terrifying grip her boyfriend has on her? And what scares her more, Michael's violent outbursts or her paralyzing fear of being alone? Ruth definitely does have a few traits of dependent personality disorder. In her dream, which we can kind of take as symbolic of what she longs and hopes for, it's clear that she thinks that the relationship, or at least wants the relationship to be mended. Even though, reading it as a third party, it's pretty clear that their relationship is on the rocks. She clearly relies upon Michael's opinion of her to validate herself too, and she fears being alone. Do you want to start your own business? She asks, setting his glass next to him. He opens another beer bottle and his smile turns cold. I'm meeting people in blue, he answers. Talking about jobs. Nothing's happening. Doing all I can. You're lazy because you don't want to put in the effort, she replies. But I do find it debatable that she would be to the extent of being diagnosable, because she's willing to confront Michael with something that he doesn't want to hear, and most people with dependent personality disorder, they would not want to make the waves. Plus, there were a lot more passages that we read in the first video of this mini-series that indicate that she can make decisions for herself. She doesn't depend upon Michael holding her hand through every important decision that she makes. The defining traits of avoidant personality disorder are low self-esteem, shame, and a severe dread of being criticized. The thought of being embarrassed or looking silly petrifies those who suffer from this disorder, especially if they think criticism will follow. Isolation, emotional disconnection from others, depression and loneliness often follow in the heels of this crippling anxiety. Those persons long for close relationships but never feel they deserve the love of others. After all, eventually any friend they make will see how broken, worthless, and unlovable they are and walk out, so why invite that pain? Instead, it's easier to just fantasize about perfect friends and family who can't leave you. But they inevitably must interact with others at some point. When they must, they're tense and quiet. Experts see avoidant personality disorder and social anxiety as flip sides of the same coin. However, the personality disorder causes more broad and crippling anxiety than social anxiety does. We already saw that Ruth does have some problems with self-image and self-esteem. But it seems to be more linked to Michael's treatment of her than it does some type of insecurity coming from her mind. It seems too externally based, not internally. Besides that, she really doesn't seem to have any other symptoms of this. She fears Michael's outbursts, but not really just plain criticism. And she definitely does not avoid relationships. She clings to Michael. If you or someone you love seems to have one or some of these personality disorders, please seek a mental health professional to make the diagnosis. If you really want to know for sure, please don't do it yourself.
Please.
If possible, look into getting therapy if the symptoms of it are really interfering with your life and relationships.
We don't want that.
Ruth and Michael in the empty couple, we are not done studying them yet. Please join us for the third and final video in the mini-series, Why Women Stay in Abusive Relationships. Please stay tuned for the last installment, and until next video, I wish you nothing less than healthy minds and happy relationships. Bye everyone!